I, a 28-year-old male, never thought I'd be posting here, but I need to get this off my chest. Honestly, looking back, I probably should have seen the red flags, but you know what they say about love being blind? Yeah, it turns out it can make you straight up stupid too. Here's the deal. I got engaged to this amazing woman, a 26-year-old female, or at least I thought she was amazing at the time. We'd been dating for about 1.5 years, and everything seemed perfect. She was smart, beautiful, and we just clicked, you know? We had our cultural differences. I'm American born and raised, while she comes from a different background. But hey, that's what made us interesting, right? God, I was so naive. Let me give you some background. My parents moved to the United States in their 20s to chase the American dream, and they absolutely killed it. They supported me when I moved out at 19, helped me through college, and basically taught me that independence is key to personal growth. Pretty standard American stuff, right? Well, my fiancée came from a culture where living with your parents isn't just normal, it's expected, even after marriage. When she first brought it up, I thought she was joking. Like, seriously? Living with the in-laws? That's when the first discussion happened, and by discussion, I mean she gave me this whole speech about respecting cultural differences and how this was non-negotiable in her family. Here's where I might have been the asshole. Trying to be culturally sensitive, I straight up told her I wasn't comfortable with it. Her apartment wasn't even big enough for all of us. We're talking about a 2-bedroom place that barely fit her and her parents already. But get this, she made it seem like her parents were temporary residents with her. Looking back, that should have been red flag number 1. The way she worded things was always just slightly off. But you know what love does to your brain? It makes you compromise on things you never thought you would. So after weeks of back and forth, she came up with this brilliant solution. Just try it for a few months, she said. If you're not comfortable, we can move out. Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. So wrong. I agreed because, hey, I was trying to be the bigger person here. Show her I respected her culture and all that jazz. Plus, her parents seemed super sweet when I met them. Her mom would make these amazing traditional dishes, and her dad would try to talk sports with me, even though he clearly had no idea about American football. They were putting on the performance of a lifetime, and I was their standing ovation. The first few days after moving in were interesting. Everything seemed fine on the surface. They'd smile at me during breakfast, ask about my day during dinner, and generally act like the perfect future-in-laws. But there was this undercurrent of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone stops talking? Yeah, multiply that by about 100. The apartment situation was exactly as cramped as I'd feared. My fiancée and I shared her old room, which barely fit a queen-sized bed and a dresser. Her parents had the master bedroom, and the living room became this weird shared space where nobody felt completely comfortable. The walls were thin, like here every cough thin, and privacy became this mythical concept I'd tell myself stories about at night. But the real kicker, the thing that should have had me running for the hills, was the constant conversations in their native language. Now, I'm not one of those speak English in America guys, absolutely not. But when you're living together and 3 people constantly have conversations you can't understand, it starts to mess with your head. I tried to be proactive about it. I asked my fiancée to teach me her language multiple times. I mean, wouldn't that be the perfect solution? I could learn more about her culture, communicate with her parents better, and stop feeling like an outsider in what was supposed to be my future family. But every single time, she'd brush it off with some excuse. It's too complicated, she'd say, or, you don't need to learn it, we can speak English with you. Looking back now, I want to grab my past self by the shoulders and shake some sense into him. But hindsight's 20/20, right? At the time, I was just trying to make it work. Trying to be understanding, trying to be the kind of partner who could bridge cultural gaps and make this multicultural relationship thing work. You know how in movies there's always that scene where someone walks into a room and everyone suddenly starts speaking in whispers? That was literally my life, except the whispers were in a language I couldn't understand. Let me paint you a picture of a typical evening. I'd come home from work exhausted from my tech job, relevant later, and they'd be sitting in the living room, chatting away in their native language. The moment I walked in, my fiancé's mom would get this look on her face. Like when you catch someone talking about you but they try to play it cool. My fiancée would quickly switch to English, asking about my day with this overly bright smile that never quite reached her eyes. I started taking online language classes in secret. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, why the secrecy? But after my fiancée shot down my request to learn their language so many times, it felt weird bringing it up again. Plus, part of me wanted to understand what they were saying without them knowing I could. Petty? Maybe, but remember how I mentioned those weird vibes? They were getting stronger. The classes were basic stuff. Hello, goodbye, numbers, that kind of thing. But I managed to pick up a few key phrases. The one that kept coming up, get it done. My future mother-in-law would say it to my fiancé constantly, always with this urgent tone that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. When I'd look at them questioningly, they'd both just smile and wave it off. Here's where it gets really sketchy. I noticed a pattern. Every time my fiancé and I would talk about money or our future plans, her mom would suddenly need to discuss something important with her in their language. These important discussions would always leave my fiancé looking stressed and her mom looking annoyed. One particular incident stands out. I was talking about buying a house after our wedding. I had some savings and a good job in tech, and suddenly, my future mother-in-law practically dragged my fiancé into the kitchen for one of their private chats. I could hear their voices getting heated, but of course, I couldn't understand a word. When they came back, my fiancé immediately started asking about joint bank accounts and whether I'd thought about adding her name to my existing accounts. The honeymoon planning, or lack thereof, was another red flag the size of Texas. Every time I brought it up, my fiancé would have some excuse, work is really busy right now, or let's wait until after we sort out our living situation. But she had no problem planning other things, like how to combine our finances, or whether I'd consider adding her name to the lease of my rental property.
Yeah, I have one, and no, I hadn't told her about it yet.
I tried talking to my parents about it, but they were trying so hard to be supportive of my multicultural relationship that they kept making excuses. It's just cultural differences, my mom would say. Give it time, my dad would add. But my gut was screaming that something wasn't right. The worst part? I started feeling like I was going crazy. You know that feeling when you're the only one who can see something's wrong, but everyone else is acting like everything's normal? That was my life. I'd catch these looks between my fiancé and her mom, hear snippets of conversations that would suddenly stop when I entered the room. Notice how they'd immediately switch to English mid-sentence when they realized I was within earshot. I started documenting everything. Call me paranoid, but I began keeping a journal of all the weird incidents. The times my future mother-in-law would ask surprisingly specific questions about my income, the way my fiancé would deflect any conversation about her immigration status, how they'd have these intense conversations in their language that would end abruptly when I walked in. At work, I started taking longer hours just to avoid going home. My coworkers noticed the change in me. "You don't smile as much anymore," one of them told me. If they only knew what was going on in my head. The thing about being in a situation like this is that you start doubting yourself. Was I being xenophobic? Paranoid? Maybe I was just looking for problems because I was stressed about the engagement. But then something would happen, like catching my future mother-in-law quickly closing a notebook when I walked in, or my fiancé getting super defensive when I asked about her childhood here in America, and those doubts would come rushing back. Remember how I mentioned my future mother-in-law kept saying get it done in their language? Well, things started getting really intense about 2 months into living together. Their private conversations went from suspicious to straight-up aggressive. My future mother-in-law wasn't just saying it anymore. She was practically hissing it at my fiancé when she thought I wasn't paying attention. One night, I was in our bedroom, working late on my laptop, thin walls, remember, and I could hear them arguing in the kitchen. My future mother-in-law's voice was getting louder and louder, even though my fiancé kept shushing her. The only words I could understand were get it done, and what sounded like bank in their language. When I walked out to get some water, they both froze like deer in headlights. My fiancé quickly said they were discussing wedding preparations at 11 p.m. Right. The next day, my fiancé started acting weird about my phone. Like weird. She'd peek over my shoulder when I was texting, asking casual but not casual questions about my banking apps. "Oh, you do all your banking on your phone? That's so convenient. Do you ever worry about security?" Then she suggested we should share our passwords since we're getting married anyway. Yeah, no. Here's where it gets really messed up. I caught her going through my work bag one morning. She played it off like she was looking for gum, but I'm not an idiot. My work laptop was in there, along with some financial documents I'd brought home to review. When I confronted her about it, she burst into tears, saying I didn't trust her, and how could I accuse her of snooping when she was just looking for gum? Classic Darvo, as you guys pointed out in the comments. The pressure about the joint bank account was getting insane. Every single day, she'd find some way to bring it up. My friend just opened a joint account with her fiancé. It's so romantic. Or, don't you think it would be easier to plan the wedding if we combined our finances? When I'd say I wanted to wait until after the wedding, her mom would start rapid-fire talking in their language, and my fiancé would look like she was about to have a panic attack. I started noticing other weird things too, like how they never got any mail at the apartment. None. Zero. In 2 months of living there, I never saw a single piece of mail with their names on it. When I casually mentioned this, my future father-in-law mumbled something about paperless billing and changed the subject. Then there was the incident with my fiancé's childhood photos. She told me she grew up here in America, right? Well, one day I asked to see some of her old school pictures. She got super flustered and said they were all lost in a move. But later that week, I overheard her yell at her mom in their language about the photos. When I walked into the room, they both shut up so fast I thought they'd given themselves whiplash. My future mother-in-law was getting more aggressive with her timeline too. I kept catching phrases like "before he finds out" and running out of time in their conversations. Remember those language classes I was taking? Yeah, they were starting to pay off in the worst possible way. I wasn't fluent by any means, but I was picking up enough words to know something was seriously wrong. The wedding planning was another red flag factory. My fiancé kept pushing for a quick courthouse ceremony. When I talked about wanting a real wedding with family and friends, she'd get super anxious and start speaking with her mom in their language. The next day, she'd come up with some excuse about why a big wedding was a bad idea, it's too expensive, or we should save that money for a house instead. Right, the house she was suddenly desperate to buy together. I started having trouble sleeping every night. I'd lie awake, listening to them whisper in the living room after they thought I was asleep. Sometimes, I'd hear my name followed by hushed arguments. My fiancée would come to bed late thinking I was asleep, and I'd feel her tossing and turning beside me, checking her phone constantly. The breaking point, I found a notebook hidden in our closet, filled with their handwriting in their language. The only things I could understand were numbers, big numbers, and my name. When I asked my fiancée about it, she snatched it away and said it was wedding budget planning, but I saw the panic in her eyes. That's when I knew I had to do something drastic. After finding that notebook, I knew I had to get proof of whatever was going on. I'm a tech guy, so I had a decent voice recorder app on my phone. Not proud of what I did next, but desperate times, you know? I started recording their conversations when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The first few recordings were useless, just normal household stuff, talking about dinner, complaining about the weather. But then came that night. Yeah, it deserves the capital letters. I got home from work earlier than usual because a meeting got canceled. As I was walking up to our apartment door, I could hear them arguing, like full-on screaming match arguing. Instead of going in, I stood there and hit record on my phone. My future mother-in-law was losing it. Her voice was so loud, I was surprised the neighbors hadn't called the cops. My fiancé was crying. I could hear that clearly through the door. I could hear the intensity, even if I couldn't understand most of what they were saying. But remember that phrase, "get it done"? Yeah, my future mother-in-law was practically shrieking it. I stood there for almost 15 minutes, just recording. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped my phone twice. The only words I could pick out were bank, green card, and something about time running out. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it through the door. Finally, I took a deep breath, stopped the recording, and walked in like nothing was wrong. The silence that hit when I opened the door was deafening. My fiancée was in the kitchen, clearly trying to hide that she'd been crying. My future mother-in-law was sitting at the dining table, her face red from yelling. They both looked at me like they'd seen a ghost. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. My fiancé forced a smile and said they were just discussing wedding plans.
Right, because everyone cries and screams about flower arrangements.
That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the recording, trying to pick out words I knew, but I needed help. That's when I remembered Emma, not her real name, my coworker. She was from the same country as my fiancé, but I'd never mentioned it to anyone at home. The next day at work, I caught Emma during lunch break. My hands were sweating as I approached her desk. "Hey, can I ask you something kind of weird?" She looked up from her salad, probably thinking I needed help with a coding problem or something. "I know this is strange, but do you speak their language?" Her eyes lit up, and she nodded. That's when I told her I needed help translating something. I didn't give her any context at first, just asked if she'd listened to a recording. We went to one of the empty conference rooms. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hit play on my phone. As the recording started playing, Emma's expression changed from curiosity to concern to straight-up horror. About halfway through, she grabbed my arm. "Stop the recording," she said. Her face had gone pale. "Who are these people?" When I told her it was my fiancé and future mother-in-law, she looked like she was going to be sick. "You need to get out of there," she said, like today. "And you need to call the police." I laughed nervously, thinking she was exaggerating. She wasn't laughing. "This isn't funny," she said. "They're planning something really bad." That's when she translated everything, every single word. With each sentence, I felt my world crumbling around me. The green card thing? That was just the tip of the iceberg. They were planning to clean out my accounts once they had access. The notebook I found? It was a detailed list of my assets they'd managed to discover. The worst part? The phrase my future mother-in-law kept screaming about getting done? It was about getting my fiancé's name on my accounts before I figured out the truth about her status. Turns out, my fiancée wasn't just hiding her immigration status, she was hiding a whole history of similar scams. I sat there in that conference room, feeling like I was going to throw up. Emma kept asking if I was okay, but how do you respond to finding out your entire relationship was a con? That the woman you loved had been playing you from day one? Let me break down the full conversation she translated, and trust me, it gets wild. My future mother-in-law wasn't just angry, she was panicking because their whole timeline was falling apart. Here's what they were arguing about. Chivalry. Fiancé. I can't rush him about the joint account anymore. He's already getting suspicious. Finch mother-in-law tent, we're running out of time. Your visitor visa expires in 3 months. Do you want to go back after all the work we put into finding him? Fiancé. You think I don't know that? But he's different from the others. He actually checks his accounts every day. He works in tech, he's not stupid. Teton mother-in-law, tenant, and you're not trying hard enough. Why do you think we chose him? Have you seen his house, the rental property? We didn't spend 6 months tracking his finances for you to get cold feet now. Yeah, 6 months. They'd been watching me for 6 months before we even met. That cute coffee shop where we had our first date? Not a coincidence. They knew my routine. They knew I stopped there every Tuesday and Thursday before work. But wait, it gets better, worse. Emma's hands were shaking as she translated the next part. Say to another-in-law, to your sister managed to get everything done in 4 months with her target. Why are you taking so long? Fiancé, because her guy was an idiot. This one has everything locked down. I can't even get his phone password. Torn a mother-in-law tenant, then find it. Drug his drink if you have to. We need access to his accounts before the wedding. Emma stopped translating at this point and just looked at me. There's more, she said, but are you sure you want to hear it? I nodded. I needed to know everything. Fiancé. What if he finds out about the others, about Detroit? To mother-in-law, he won't. That idiot never pressed charges. He was too embarrassed about falling for it, just like the others. Others, plural, Detroit. My fiancé had done this before, multiple times. I was just the latest target in their family scam operation. Emma explained that they were discussing at least 3 previous targets. Their word, not mine. The worst part, the absolute gut punch of it all? Here's what my loving fiancé said when her mom asked why she was getting cold feet. Fiancé, why do you think I agreed to marry him? Have you seen his house? It's huge. He doesn't know I don't have a green card. I'll have to coax him into believing my story. We're engaged now, but we need to wait to make our move. He's loaded. We just need to be patient. Loaded. Mister, I'm a software developer with a decent job and some savings, but they'd somehow built me up in their minds as this wealthy target. The rental property I'd scraped and saved for was like a flashing dollar sign to them. Emma went on to explain more context she picked up from the conversation. This wasn't just a green card scam, it was a full-on family business. They would identify targets, single, financially stable men with minimal family connections, gather intel on their finances, and then arrange chance meetings with either my fiancée or one of her sisters. The plan was always the same. 1. Get engaged quickly. 2. Push for joint accounts. 3. Rush the wedding. 4. Clean out the accounts. 5. Disappear. I sat there in that conference room, feeling like I was going to pass out. Emma kept asking if I needed water, if I should call someone, but who do you call when you discover your entire relationship was a carefully orchestrated con? Then Emma dropped another bomb. They've done this before, recently. They mentioned something about a guy in Detroit who almost caught them. They had to leave in the middle of the night. That's probably why they're rushing now. Everything started making sense. The pressure about joint accounts, the hidden notebook with financial details, the constant refusal to let me learn their language, the pushing for a quick courthouse wedding. They weren't just after a green card, they were after everything. After that conversation with Emma in the conference room, I couldn't go back to work. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type, and I kept having to run to the bathroom to throw up. Emma, absolute angel that she is, told our boss I had food poisoning and needed to go home, but I couldn't go home, not to that apartment, not to them. Instead, I called my dad. Looking back, I'm so grateful I did. The conversation went something like this. Shmori sir me, Dad, I need help, like, right now. Tad, what's wrong? Are you okay? Po me, voice cracking. The engagement, it's all fake. They're trying to scam me. Kida Dad. Dead silence for a moment. I'm on my way. Don't go home. Meet me at the local diner. I sat in that diner for 45 minutes, jumping every time the door opened. My dad showed up with my mom, who'd left work early, and my uncle, who's a cop. Thank God for group texts, am I right? I played them the recording, and Emma had sent me a rough translation via email, which I showed them. My mom started crying. My dad looked like he was about to commit murder. My uncle went straight into cop mode, asking questions about timelines, documentation, everything they'd said or done that seemed suspicious now. Here's where it gets intense. We needed to get my stuff out of the apartment, but we had to be smart about it. My uncle advised us to do it while my fiancée was at work, but we knew her mom would be home. Thing is, we couldn't wait. My uncle was worried they might destroy evidence if they realized I knew. So, we made a plan. My dad and uncle would come with me. My mom would wait in the car as a lookout. She insisted on being involved somehow. We'd get in, get my stuff, and get out. Document everything, but don't engage. When we got to the apartment, my future father-in-law was there instead of the mom. The look on his face when he saw me with my dad and uncle, I'll never forget it. He tried to stop us from entering, saying we needed to wait for my fiancée. My uncle flashed his badge, off-duty but still, and said, "Sir, I suggest you step aside." The next 20 minutes were a blur. We grabbed my important documents first. Thankfully, I kept those in a locked box in our closet. Then clothes, electronics, everything I could think of that was mine. My dad was methodically photographing everything we took. Smart thinking, in case they tried to accuse me of stealing later. My father-in-law kept trying to call someone, probably my fiancée or his wife, but nobody was picking up. He followed us around the apartment, alternating between pleading and threatening in broken English. "You don't understand," he kept saying. "This is all a misunderstanding." Yeah, right. The only misunderstanding was me thinking their daughter actually loved me. The whole time, my phone was blowing up with texts from my fiancée. "Where are you? Why aren't you at work? My dad says you're taking your things. Please answer me. Whatever you think you know, it's not true. We need to talk." My uncle had already advised me not to respond to anything, document everything, save every message, but don't engage. The final straw, while we were packing, my father-in-law got a call. He didn't manage to take it outside in time. It was my fiancée's sister. You know, the one who'd successfully scammed that guy in Detroit. We could hear her voice through the speaker. "Did he find the papers? Make sure he doesn't find the papers." My dad had to physically hold me back from tearing apart the apartment looking for whatever papers they were talking about. My uncle reminded me we had enough evidence already with the recording. As we were leaving, my father-in-law made one last attempt. "Please, we can work this out. She loves you. Think about her future." My dad, my quiet, peaceful dad, who I've never heard raise his voice, turned around and said, "The only future you need to think about is the one where you're explaining this to federal authorities." We drove straight to my uncle's precinct to file a report, then to my parents' house, where my mom stress-baked 3 batches of cookies while calling every wedding vendor to cancel. We hadn't paid any deposits yet, thank God. First off, my dad's lawyer, absolute beast. The moment she heard the recording, she didn't just see a fraud case, she saw a whole criminal enterprise. Turns out she'd handled a similar case 2 years ago in another state. Guess what? Same MO, different sister. Small world, huh? The first couple of weeks were intense. My lawyer advised complete radio silence with my ex and her family, which was harder than you'd think. They tried everything, showing up at my parents' house, cops were called, calling from different numbers, having friends reach out on social media, even sending a freaking priest to talk to me, not even our religion. But the best part? They didn't know we had the recording. They thought I'd just gotten cold feet or found some minor inconsistency. Oh boy, were they in for a surprise. The investigation started small, just my case, but then my lawyer started digging. Remember that guy in Detroit my ex mentioned? They found him. Turns out, he wasn't the only one. There were others, a doctor in Michigan in 2018, an engineer in Texas in 2019, a small business owner in Florida in 2020, and 3 more who were too embarrassed to come forward initially. Each case followed the same pattern. 1. Target successful, single guys. 2. Rush into engagement. 3. Push for, joint accounts. 4. Try to get access to finances. 5. Disappear once they hit pay dirt or if they got caught. But here's where it gets wild. The investigators found a notebook. Remember how their dad tried to stop us from finding the papers? Yeah, they found them when executing a search warrant. It wasn't just notes about me, it was their whole playbook. Lists of potential targets with detailed financial info. Scripts for different scenarios if he asks about green card, say, contact info for people who could help with documentation, actual rankings of potential targets based on estimated net worth. The notebook had everything, and I mean everything. They'd been stalking me for months before we accidentally met. My daily coffee shop schedule, which gym I went to, where I did my grocery shopping, my freaking credit score, lists of my known assets, even notes about my dating app preferences. Reading through it made me physically sick. Every spontaneous meeting, every coincidental run-in, every shared interest, all carefully planned and orchestrated. They even had notes about which sports teams I followed so my ex could pretend to be a fan. But wait, it gets better, worse. The investigators found a whole group chat where different family members shared tips about finding and scamming targets. My ex was in there bragging about how she'd landed a big fish, me, and giving advice to her cousins about how to spot good targets. The legal proceedings were a nightmare, but in a good way, if that makes sense. Every time we thought we'd uncovered everything, something new would pop up. Fake documents workshop in their basement, multiple sets of identification, hard drives full of background checks on potential targets, bank accounts in 3 different countries. My lawyer was like a kid in a candy store. This isn't just fraud, she kept saying. This is a whole RICO case. Had to Google what that meant. Organized crime stuff. The immigration authorities got involved when they realized most of their documentation was fake. Turns out, my ex hadn't grown up here like she claimed. She'd been in and out of the country on various visas using different names and documents. The real kicker? They found a literal training manual, like an actual document explaining how to pick vulnerable targets. Recently divorced men were preferred, create natural, meeting opportunities, build trust quickly, push for quick engagements, gain access to finances, handle suspicious family members, disappear without leaving traces. My ex tried to play innocent at first, claiming she really loved me and her family forced her into it. Then she tried to claim she was a victim too. Finally, when they showed her the evidence, including that recording, the look on her face was priceless. She tried to cut a deal. I am now staying with my parents. After everything that happened, I can finally say it's over. The court proceedings wrapped up last month. Here's how it all ended. My ex-fiancée, 3 years in federal prison for fraud, followed by deportation. Her parents deported immediately. They were here on expired visitor visas anyway. Her siblings, various charges, mostly related to document fraud. Honestly, watching them in court was surreal. My ex tried playing the victim card until the prosecutor played the recording. The look on her face when she realized I had proof of everything? I won't lie, that felt good. I didn't stick around for the whole trial. My lawyer said I didn't need to be there every day, and honestly, I had better things to do with my life, like actually living it. The restitution they were ordered to pay? I'm not holding my breath, but that's fine. Thanks to never creating that joint account and catching this before the wedding, my finances are intact. The only thing I really lost was time and trust, and I'm working on the trust part. Emma, my coworker who translated the recording, has become one of my closest friends. She feels guilty about ruining my engagement, her words, but I keep telling her she saved my life. We grab coffee sometimes and laugh about how I'm way more careful about who I date now. My parents have been incredible through all of this. Dad still occasionally apologizes for not seeing through them sooner, but I remind him that they fooled everyone. Mom stopped trying to set me up with nice girls from church, mostly. And they've both been super supportive of me just taking time to focus on myself. Life's actually pretty good now. Got a promotion at work, started taking actual language classes properly this time, moved into a new place, even adopted a dog. Best decision ever. The whole experience taught me some valuable lessons. Trust your gut when something feels off. Don't ignore red flags just because you're in love. Keep your finances separate until you're absolutely sure. Learn the language if your partner speaks one you don't, and it's okay to take things slow.